Okay, so today we are going to go over a way to take notes on your reading to kind of monitor your comprehension about what you're reading. So in front of you, you have a graphic organizer. Unless you're at home, there's a link in Canvas to where you can make a copy of it. I don't care if you type it into the Google slide or if you draw the boxes yourself on a piece of paper and write it out. Some of you guys like to do things on paper and some of you like to type. So even though you guys all have a copy in front of you, if you prefer, once we're done doing the example, to do it digitally, that's fine as well. So it's kind of up to you. So as the example, we are going to look on page 35, The Great Mouse Plot. This is from the book Boy, and it is the autobiography, sort of Roald Dahl. It's a memoir, page 35. So a memoir is just a kind of like an autobiography, only it's a book filled with stories about a person's life. So he wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the BFG, James and the Giant Peach, The Witches. I'm trying to think of what other books you might have heard of. I think those are probably the most popular ones.
James and the Giant Peach.
Yep, I said that one. So we're just going to read this short little chapter called The Great Mouse Plot. So the first thing you're going to do on yours is at the very top, there's like a strip that there's nothing there. That's where you're going to just write what chapters you are filling this out over. So we're doing The Great Mouse Plot. So I'm just going to write The Great Mouse Plot, so that I know what chapters it is. If your book does not have chapters, then you can just put the title, like this one. Okay, so follow along while I read aloud. And as I read, you can get some from my crate. As I read, we're going to stop and fill out what we can. Because oftentimes, how many of you guys read the entire chapter and then you go back and you would try to fill this out?
Me?
Most of you, right? And then you'd be like, well, I forget, I don't know. The whole point of note taking is to do it while reading so that you don't forget, all right? So we are going to fill this out as we read. Here we go. My four friends and I had come across a loose floorboard at the back of the classroom. So right now, setting, I know they are in a classroom, or at least part of it, right? The nice thing about notes, you don't have to write in complete sentences. You can just write in single words or bullet points. And when we pried it up with the blade of a pocket knife, we discovered a big hollow space underneath. This, we decided, would be our secret hiding place for sweets and other small treasures, such as conkers and mucky nuts and bird eggs. Every afternoon, and he's in Europe, by the way, so some of the words and some of the things are going to be like, you're like, what is that? Because he's European, and he's older, like older than Mr. Jones older. So some of the stuff you're going to be like, oh, what? I don't even know what that is. Because we don't either have that here, or it's just something from in the time period when he was a kid. Every afternoon, when the last lesson was over, the five of us would wait until the classroom had emptied. Then we would lift up the floorboard and examine our secret hoard, perhaps adding to it or taking something away. So we know right now there are four friends in the chapter. And Roald Dahl himself, right, are in the chapter. One day when we lifted it up, we found a dead mouse lying among our treasures. So one event is they found dead mouse.
Ew.
Right? It was an exciting discovery. The Waits took it out by the tail and waved it in front of our faces. What shall we do with it? He cried. It stinks, someone shouted. Throw it out of the window quick. Hold on a tick, I said. Don't throw it away. Waits hesitated. They all looked at me. When writing about oneself, one must strive to be truthful. Truth is most important than modesty. I must tell you, therefore, that it was I and I alone who had the idea for the great and daring mouse plot. We all have our moments of brilliance and glory, and this was mine. So a bullet point note is going to be at the end of each page or each 2 pages. We're just going to write a quick bullet point note. So this note is that Roald Dahl made up the plot, right? He came up with made up the mouse plot. He's the one that made it up, and he's taking ownership, right? What else did he say? He said when one writes about themselves, they must be truthful. So he is truthful. One thing we learned about the main character, or characters, in this case, Roald Dahl, is he's truthful. Why don't we, I said, slip it into one of Mrs. Pratchett's jar of sweets? So Mrs. Pratchett, a little background knowledge, is the shopkeeper of a candy shop, and she is not nice. She's always kicking them out. If you're not gonna buy something, get out. If you, like you naughty kids, she's really, really, really mean. So they want to slip, his idea is to slip the mouse into one of her candy jars at her candy shop. Then when she puts her dirty hand in to grab a handful, she'll grab a stinky dead mouse instead. The other 4 stared at me in wonder. Then as the sheer genius of the plot began to sink in, they all started grinning. They slapped me on the back. They cheered me and danced around the classroom. "We'll do it today," they cried. "We'll do it on the way home." "You had the idea," they said to me, "so you can be the one to put the mouse in the jar." So they plan to put mouse in a candy jar, right? That's probably like an important event. So remember, we're just gonna write down the important events. Thwaites handed me the mouse. I put it in my trouser pocket, and then the 5 of us left the school, crossed the village green, and headed for the sweet shop. We were tremendously jazzed up. We felt like a gang of desperados setting out to rob a train or blow up the sheriff's office. "Make sure you put it in the jar, which is used often," someone said. "I'm putting it in the grasshoppers," I said. The gobstopper jar is never behind the counter. "I've got a penny," Thwaites said, "so I'll ask for 1 sherbet sucker and 1 bootlace. And while she turns away to get them, you slip the mouse in quickly into the gobstoppers." Thus everything was arranged. We were strutting a little as we entered the shop. We were the victors now, and Mrs. Pratchett was the victim. She stood behind the counter, and her small, malignant pig eyes watched us suspiciously as we came forward. "1 sherbet sucker, please," Thwaites said to her, holding out his penny. I kept to the rear of the group, and when I saw Mrs. Pratchett turn her head away for a couple of seconds to fish a sherbet sucker out of the box, I lifted the heavy glass lid of the gobstopper jar and dropped the mouse in. So, bullet point notes. He dropped in the mouse, right? He put mouse in gobstoppers. Right? Okay. So events in the chapter and bullet point notes can be very similar to each other, but these just come at the end of each page, where events in the chapter might not come at every page. The events in the chapter might come every couple pages.
Would there be another setting for the candy shop?
Very good. There would be another setting. So the setting changed. So now they're in the candy shop. And we added another character, right?
Yeah.
And this is Pritchard, right? Let's see here. Or Pratchett, my bad. Okay. What else did we learn about the character so far? Not only is he truthful, he's kind of sneaky, right? He is sneaky. So sneaky, plays pranks. So he drops the mouse in. Then I replaced the lid as silently as possible. My heart was thumping like mad and my hands had gone all sweaty. "And one bootlace, please," I heard Thwaite saying. When I turned around, I saw Mrs. Pratchett holding out the bootlace in her filthy fingers. "I don't want all the lot of you trooping in here if you're only one of you is buying," she screamed at us. "Now beat it. Go on. Get out." As soon as we were outside, we broke into a run. "Did you do it?" they shouted at me. "Of course I did," I said. "Well done, you," they cried. "What a show." I felt like a hero. I was a hero. It was marvelous to be so popular. Okay, so at the end of that page, they ran out of the shop, right? Any other major events that we don't have down that we could add that might have not happened like at the end? No? Okay. All right, so like I said, these two are going to be pretty similar. So some of the things could fall in both. I don't care which category you put it in. The events are only events, whereas your bullet points can be anything. So like, I want to know, I just got done reading, I want to know who found the mouse? Or did it just stay there? Or did it stay in the jar? Like, did someone find it? Do the boys get in trouble?
Yeah.
I don't know, we don't know, do they? Get in trouble. Like, these are things that are part of my notes, right? Because it's what I'm thinking. So my notes can be kind of what I'm thinking, what I noticed, things like that. Do we learn anything else about the character?
No.
Not really, right? We don't really learn much else. We just know that Roald Dahl he says he tells the truth, but he's also sneaky and he likes to play pranks. And so it was a short chapter, so I don't have a ton of information, but I do have, enough that as I continue reading, I would fill another one of these out for the next chapter. Or I could fill this out for 2 chapters, right? You don't want to put any more than 2 chapters on each page of notes, because then that defeats the point of notes, because you get confused on where the information is found. So you only want 1, maybe 2 chapters per note organizer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anybody want to know what happens?
No. Yes.
Whether they get caught or not?
No.
So, what ends up happening is that if you continue reading, they said, what happens, what's going on, why is the sweet shop closed? So the next day they go past the candy store and they find that there's a closed sign and they are nervous. They're like, what happened? So look, I cried, the Gobstopper jar's gone. It's not on the shelf, there's a gap where it used to be. It's on the floor, someone said. It's smashed to bits and there's Gobstoppers everywhere. There's the mouse, someone else shouted. We could see it all, the huge glass jar smashed to smithereens with the dead mouse lying in the wreckage and hundreds of many-colored Gobstoppers littering the floor. She got such a shock when she grabbed hold of the mouse, she dropped everything, somebody was saying. But why didn't she sweep it all up and open the shop? I asked. Nobody answered me. We turned away and walked toward the school. All of a sudden, we began to feel slightly uncomfortable. There was something not quite right about the shop being closed. Even Thwaites was unable to offer a reasonable explanation. We became silent. There was a faint scent of danger in the air. Each one of us had a whiff of it. Alarm bells were beginning to ring in our ears. So then they end up at school, and they're like, did we scare her? Did she have a heart attack? Did she die? They start freaking out, thinking they're going to be wanted for murder. Like, they start going through all these worst case scenarios. But that's not what happens. So the headmaster is like the principal of his school. They call them headmasters. And so he's not very nice. His name was Mr. Combs. And so Mr. Combs mumbles through the same old prayer we have every day. And then this time, he does not lead the whole group back to class. Instead, he says, everyone's to go out, line up around the playground immediately, leave your books behind, no talking. So they're like, oh no, they're after the killer. We're all going to jail. We're gonna be in so much trouble, right? And they're like, I bet the police are outside. And so they get in a big line and they yell at them to stop talking and that there needs to be silence. And then all of a sudden, out comes, this is a true story, this has really happened to him. Out comes Mrs. Pratchett. So the boys are like, oh my gosh, she's alive. But why is she here at school, right? And they're like, oh, we didn't kill her. So then they said, we're gonna start over here, Mr. Combs says. And Mrs. Pratchett, he grasped her by one of her skinny arms and led her to where the sixth form was standing. She kept still holding, then still kept holding her arm, proceeded to lead her on a brisk walk down the line of boys, like someone inspecting the troops. What are they doing? I whispered. They didn't answer. And then Mrs. Pratchett was like, nope, nope, too big, nope, nope, nope. So they get all around. Once they get to the boys, she says, it's these boys, and points the boys out. So then the boys end up getting called to Mr. Combs' office, the principal's office, and they end up getting beaten. They end up getting spanked for doing this. And Roald Dahl's mom actually gets really, really upset. They actually get caned. It's a practice that they do in Europe. And so the mom gets really mad when Roald Dahl goes home and finds out that that's what he was caned for, and so she ends up pulling him from school. So if you've ever seen the movie Matilda, the headmaster that's really mean, Miss Trenchbull, he kind of made her character after Mr. Combs because he really knew of Mr. Combs. So a lot of his books are based after things that happened in his life. So this is actually a really good book if you're interested in any of that. I might have it as an option for you guys to read later. But for now, this is what you guys need to make sure that you do for your novel that you are currently reading. So whether you do it on a graphic organizer, I can give you another copy. Whether you do it on the back of this and just draw it out yourself and take a picture, upload it in Canvas or not. So you need to read the next chapter. I'm only gonna make you read one chapter today. And while you're reading that chapter, you're gonna fill this out and then upload it. Or, like I said, there's a link in Google Slides, whereas if you just wanna type in it, you just have to insert a text box, and then you can type all you want. So it's completely up to you, all right? So if you want a copy of this, you just gotta give me a minute so I can upload this video and get it published on Canvas, okay? If you have no further questions, let me stop my recording really quickly.